the Republican Party is a great party for the Second Amendment. Every Lincoln Day dinner, every Reagan Day dinner, everybody supports the Second Amendment. That's great. So do I. But the thing is, some of the other amendments are pretty important too. I think of like the Fourth Amendment is the right to privacy. The Fifth and Sixth Amendment, to me, are sort of the right to justice, to be treating justly, to have what's called due process. The government doesn't take it away without a procedure. You get a lawyer, you get a trial. The Sixth Amendment says you get a jury trial, and it says you get a speedy jury trial. So one of the stories that's really, I think, brought it home to me that we need to be better about the rest of the Bill of Rights is the story was in the New Yorker a couple of months ago about Khalif Browder, 16-year-old kid, black kid from the Bronx, accused of a crime, but put in Rikers Island for 3 years without a trial. Much of it in solitary confinement. He ended up trying to commit suicide. And so when you see people angry in some of our big cities, it's like, this may not be your life, but think how Khalif Browder, think how his friends and his parents now feel about justice. Think, do they think they're being treated fairly? And so what I tell people is, if the Republican Party wants to be a dominant party, they want to win Philadelphia and big cities where we haven't done very well, we need to defend the Sixth Amendment as well as we defend the Second Amendment. If I told you that 1 out of 3 African-American males is forbidden by law from voting, you might think I was talking about Jim Crow 50 years ago. Yet today, 1/3 of African-American males are still prevented from voting because of the war on drugs. The war on drugs has disproportionately affected young black males. The ACLU reports that blacks are 4 to 5 times more likely to be convicted for drug possession, although surveys indicate that blacks and whites use drugs at about the same similar rate. I tend to talk about like criminal justice all the time. I don't care what the crowd is, I'm talking about it because I feel really strongly about it. And I feel really strongly about, probably even from when I was a kid, about defending the underdog, defending the person against the establishment, against the system. People are treated unfairly by laws. And I think in our country, there are people being treated unfairly. I think that our police do, by and large, an excellent job. They're like the rest of the public. 98, 99% of them are doing a great job. They're out every day risking their lives. I do think that there is an unease in our country, though. The violent people are an aberration. The violent people killing cops and things like that, which is awful, that's an aberration. But there's a lot of also just peaceful people out there that they feel unhappy and feel like that justice is not colorblind. You know, Martin Luther King talked about there being 2 Americas. There still are people who feel like they're poor, they're unemployed, and that everywhere they turn there's a civil fine for this or a civil fine for that. Arrest statistics matter when applying for federal grants. Doesn't take much imagination to understand that it's easier to round up, arrest, and convict poor kids than it is to convict rich kids. The San Jose Mercury News reviewed 700,000 criminal cases that were matched by crime and criminal history of the defendant. The analysis revealed that similarly situated whites were far more successful than African Americans and Latinos in the plea bargaining process. In fact, at virtually every stage of pretrial negotiation, whites are more successful than non-whites. I've said over and over again that there is a racial outcome to the war on drugs. But I've also said over and over again, I don't think the police are targeting black kids. What I say is that the war on drugs has led the over-enforcement in certain communities. So, for example, white kids are using illegal drugs, so are black kids. I don't think that the police said, oh, let's go arrest black kids. I think because of where people live and where crime occurs, that there have been a disproportionate amount of black kids arrested. So I understand the sentiment of people in the African-American community who feel like justice is not colorblind. But I don't blame the police officer for saying, oh, the police officer's targeting them. I blame the politicians for writing these laws such that we've gone overboard with nonviolent crime. The last 2 presidents could conceivably have been put in jail for their drug use. And I really think, you know, look what would have happened. It would have ruined their lives. They got lucky, but a lot of poor kids, particularly in the inner city, don't get lucky. They don't have good attorneys, and they go to jail for these things, and I think it's a big mistake.
Actually, I think it would be the last 3 presidents, but who's counting?
Can you imagine? It's called civil asset forfeiture. The government can take your stuff, whatever stuff is, without ever even charging you. but definitely without a conviction. It turns justice on its head. Give you an example of some of the things in civil forfeiture that we've had a problem with. In civil forfeiture, they took a $1.5 million motel in New Jersey. Why? Because about 10 people had stayed there over 14 years who had been caught selling drugs. 10 people out of 200,000 people, and they took the hotel. I mean, you're supposed to be innocent in our country until proven guilty. That is a bedrock part of our justice system. There's a program where the people who take your stuff get to keep it, and they get to keep the proceeds. So there's a perverse incentive for the government to want to take your stuff. Interestingly, about the same amount of people were caught for drugs in other hotels in the same area, but they didn't take them because they had liens against the hotel. This hotel happened to be paid for. So the government actually looks for things that they can confiscate that are already paid for. It's not about whether individual police or police in general are good or FBI agents in general are good. I think almost all of them are good. I would say 99% of police and FBI agents are good. It's about restricting the law so bias can't enter into it. So you don't have general warrants and you have checks and balances. If the police go to a house and they think a rapist is inside the house and they didn't see him run in, but they want to capture him and they think they're in the house, to get inside the house, they stand on the curb and they call a judge. It's a check and balance because there was a time in parts of our country where maybe it was a white police officer and they just said, well, you know, black men are guilty and we're just going in the houses of black men until we find one we think committed a crime. Some of that happened in our country, and so that's why you call a judge, to prevent bias from entering into it. I think we have to pay more attention to the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was there to protect all of us. I tell people the Bill of Rights isn't necessarily for the prom queen, although it will apply to her also. It's not necessarily for the high school quarterback, the college quarterback. Those who are popular among you will always do fine. It's for the least popular among you. It's for those who might have unorthodox ideas. It's precisely for minorities. And you can be a minority because of the shade of your skin, or you can be a minority because of the shade of your ideology. You can be a minority because you're African American or Hispanic, but you can also be a minority because you're an evangelical Christian. There's all kinds of reasons that you can have minority opinions that need to be protected. The Bill of Rights should do this.